That leads us, though, to the question of fragmentation. Feminism as sisterhood, didn't it require sisterhood in order to produce the kinds of dramatic changes that feminism actually produced in the 70s? Or is sisterhood a figment of our imaginations?
That, too, I think of as quite a complicated question. I think there were claims of sisterhood that didn't necessarily rest on people really understanding each other's problems. But on the other hand, I don't think that the lack of centralization, the lack of one single organization, held the movement back. I think that decentralization does have great values. It means that people don't have to go through lots of processes of meetings before they decide to do something. Little groups of people could simply take action. I think it's often true that there were many single issue groups that came out of the women's movement, some that focus on legal rights, some that focus on rape, some that focus on reproductive rights. I think that kind of fragmentation did not necessarily hold back the movement. The danger is when people in each little subsection begin to think that theirs is the best or the most correct, in the term politically correct, or the most urgent. And I think that these organizations did best when they refused to rank and say this cause is more urgent than that cause. And they simply respected different groups working on different things.
When did the notion that to be a feminist was to hate men emerge? And do you think there's any validity in that feminism was a man-hating movement?
I really don't. Although there's a difference between hating men and being critical of some of the things that men do. I think one of the contributions of some parts of the women's movement was understanding that male domination is not because of bad attitudes on the part of individual men. For example, you might be working next to a guy who earns more wages than you do, but it's not his fault, and there's nothing that he, as an individual, can do about it. He earns higher wages because of a system that does that. He may even be against that gender inequality. And I think that's another aspect of this question about lesbian breaking. Some lesbians, it's true, for a short period of time, tried to imagine communities of women that would have no men in them.
Lesbian separatism,
yes,
they used to call it.
But my impression from studying this is there were very, very few such groups. Every woman has men in her life. She has fathers, she has brothers, she has cousins, she has uncles, she has just friends.
And children.
And they have
sons.
Male children, exactly. So I don't see any evidence for man-hating except among certain people who did outrageous things as individuals, like Valerie Solanas, who gathered a lot of publicity. But you see, it's a problem of the media. You know, there's a famous phrase, if it bleeds, it leads. You get coverage when something terrible happens. You get coverage when something outrageous happens. When, 100,000 women walk down the streets demanding equal pay, you may not get as much coverage. It's sort of more tame.
But the system that you're talking about, and I think it's worth clarifying this a little bit, we sometimes call the gender system, understanding how that system works, how gender and gender roles are institutionalized in certain kinds of ways, like understanding how racism gets institutionalized. That was one of the things that was a great breakthrough in the second wave, that second wave feminists really very quickly came to see themselves as, we even called it the system.
Yes.
Sometimes, and that, it seems to me, has brought about a kind of fundamental change in consciousness.
I think that's right, and I think that that kind of systematic male dominance functions both in the, say, the labor market, but also in what you might call the more personal realm. In the labor market, there's kind of a mutually reinforcing cycle in which women get jobs that are lower paid, but the jobs are also lower paid because women do them. There's also the age-old myth that every woman has a father or a husband to support her, and therefore she's just working for extras, that she doesn't depend on that income. I think that, luckily by now, I think we've lost most of that myth, and people understand that most families depend on two incomes. But similarly, there's that kind of systematic effect even about things like, say, violence against women. Here's an example that I think a lot of people aren't aware of. In the 19th century and well into the 20th century, in many states, the law of marriage legally obliged a woman to be available sexually to her husband whenever he wanted it. There was no such thing as a crime of marital rape. Now, most men actually didn't want that. They didn't want that kind of dominant. They would much rather have had a woman who is an equal partner in that kind of close relationship. They get much more out of it. But that kind of thing is embedded in the system, and that kind of sense of entitlement can be bred into, I don't mean biologically bred, I mean socially trained into men. So I think it's a hugely important to understand the difference between systemic male dominance and individual men's behaviors.